Week 14 fantasy schedule, no time to waste. We've got 53 games this week, the usual Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday light nights. You've got a really heavy Saturday, 15 games. Every team plays on Saturday except for Carolina and Detroit. You see Carolina's schedule down here. We've got 12 teams with 4-game weeks. These teams all have relatively unique schedules with at least 1 or 2 light nights. These teams all play Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. So a lot of the same schedule. It's going to be hard to fit these guys into your lineup, especially on that Saturday. So you're going to want somebody from one of these teams. We're going to go over Washington, Vancouver, and Seattle in detail in this video. We're back to the regular format. Just want to quickly mention Nashville, only 2 games, Islanders with 2 games. I doubt that there's that many players that you own that are going to be that important where you need to factor this in. But with that said, these 2 teams have 2-game weeks and the rest have 3. So relatively reasonable schedules available here. But with that said, there might be a better approach going forward as we head towards the playoffs. This is an analysis done by one of our Discord members, Spencer. He does really great work looking at the playoff schedule in advance, and he did really great work on this, looking at multiple week combos. So for week 13 to 14, Anaheim plays 4 games each week. So that's something to note as we're in week 14 now. Dallas had 3 games the week 13, but for 14 and 15, they've got 4 games in each. So they are going to be heavy over the next 2 weeks. So if you're looking for a longer term hold for this schedule and the next week, maybe Dallas is where you want to look. And then for 14 through 16, 3 straight weeks in a row, Ottawa has 4-game weeks. You've got Vegas with 3.6 average games per week over the 14 to 18 stretch, so a little bit longer. And then the same type of thing with Colorado. They have a 5-game week at the end of this in week 18. So that's worth noting as well. So these are some longer term plays. You can read this, you can pause it and read the rest of this, or you can join our Discord group. The link is in the description below. There's a lot of people in there putting a lot of different great content in here. Spencer does great work on the playoff schedule, so I want to thank him for that. But you can get access to this in the link in the description below. Now let's move it along and go to one of the best schedules this week, and that is the Washington Capitals. Now, as we take a look, obviously Ovechkin back and healthy, 18 goals in 22 games. He's very complete, 2.4 hits per game, 3.7 shots per game, is top 10 in the league. So you're going to want exposure to Ovechkin, and there are a couple different ways to do it. Right now, they don't have Wilson playing with him, but he's been very complete, 85 on the completeness rating, 3.1 hits per game, 28 points in 38 games, 9 power play points, and he's only 60% owned, so he might be available for you. He's a must-own in a bangers league. You also have Alexei Protas. We'll go over him in detail. A little bit lower on the shot volume, a little bit lower in terms of hits and peripherals. 32 points on the year is not bad. You also have a defensive option we'll talk about, Rasmus Sandin, 62.8 on the completeness rating. A little bit of hits and blocks coverage with him, not a lot of shot volume. You have Pierre-Luc Dubois, dual eligible. We'll go over him. 26% ownership. He might be your best 12-team ad. 29 points on the year for Dubois. Very assist heavy. As we zoom it in here, Scarbosa, a small sample size play. He was pretty good when he was in, but he's not. So looking a little bit closer, you've got Jakub Vrana, our deep league play for the week. 3 goals, 1 assist in the last 5 games. He had a 4-game point streak. 11 points on the year is not great, but that is, he's a streaky goal scorer, and you're going to get that. Another defensive ad, Matt Roy. As we zoom it out, you can see some shot volume, but a little bit more hits volume, 2.2 hits per game, 10 hits, 10 blocks in his last 4 games. So we'll look at the player hubs now. We'll start it off with Tom Wilson. You know what you're going to get with him. 3.05 hits per game, 2.26 shots per game is decent. He's getting some power play exposure. He's scoring goals. This is what he does. The only negative to his file is a minimally low point per game ceiling. 0.75 is great for a hitter who's a goal scorer. But with that said, the only thing keeping him from elite status is that 1 point per game average or thereabouts. Other than that, extremely complete. He's a 69 in terms of combined rating, but he's an 85 in terms of completeness. So one of the more complete players that you can find. Single position right wing, 60%. He might not be there for you in a 12-teamer, but if he is, definitely go out and grab him. 14 hits in his last 4 games, and that's what you've come to expect out of him. Now, another player that I've never really liked going to, but he is worth mentioning now with 8 points in his last 8 games, 2 on the power play, Pierre-Luc Dubois. A very assist-heavy file, not a lot of shot volume. He's averaging just under a hit per game. He does get the odd hit. he does block the odd shot. He gets some power play production, and he's right around the same point per game number as Tom Wilson. And he is dual position eligible at 26% ownership. So he might be your best add this week just based on what he's done lately. I know you have Connor McMichael, who's around the same ownership percentage, but he's been a little bit cooler over the last couple of weeks. Dubois has been a little bit more productive over that span. So this could be your better pickup if you're looking for one of the centers in the top 6. Another relatively hot player with the same positional eligibility and ownership percentage, you've got Alexei Protas. He's got 6 points in his last 7 games, but very goal heavy. 5 goals, 1 assist in the last 7 games. His goal pace is pretty decent. That's low 30s goal pace, 0.42 goals per game, 95th percentile there. That's relatively low shot volume. So it is worth mentioning his shooting percentage is a little bit higher than some others. So that is something to keep in mind. He doesn't hit. He doesn't get any power play time. So he's not going to be there for peripheral coverage, but he is going to get you some goal coverage. So if you're in a points league that weighs goals a little bit heavier, that would be a reason to pick him up. And that dual position eligibility will help at least on that Saturday. Maybe you can, maybe you can't get him in. But with that said, you'll still get these 3 games here on the Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So maybe worth adding Alexei Protas. And he does occasionally play with Ovechkin. I don't believe they have him with him right now, but with that said, he does occasionally get up on that top line. So that's worth mentioning as well, as they could shuffle lines during this week. Now, your deep league target this week is Jakub Vrana. 3 goals, 1 assist in his last 5 games. He's a goal scorer by nature, usually a little bit higher shot volume. This is really low, but 85th percentile in goals for a guy who's missed some time this year. He came back from injury, and he had a pretty good stretch, a 4-game point streak in there with 3 goals in that stretch, 1 assist. But it's hit or miss. This is a deep league target for a reason. He's not going to get you top 6 exposure. He's not getting power play exposure. So keep that in mind when you're looking to grab Vrana. But he is a goal scorer, and it is something that he used to do in his file, but maybe hasn't been as good at in the last couple of years since he initially left Washington. Now, in terms of defensive adds, you've got Rasmus Sandin. He was relatively hot a couple weeks ago, cooled off for about 2 weeks there in December. He's starting to heat up a little bit again. 3 assists, a power play point in his last 5 games, only 16% owned. Obviously, Jacob Chychrun has taken the mantle, and he's, forced himself onto that top power play unit. He's scoring goals, he's taking shots, he's relatively more complete than Sandin. But with that said, you still get 1.24 hits per game, 1.58 blocks per game from Sandin. I'd like to see more shot volume and goal coverage, but the assists are there, and he does get a little bit of power play 2 exposure. Ovechkin stays out there the whole time, so they basically go Carlson and Chychrun, and then when those 2 come off, they'll throw Sandin out there. So maybe you get a couple of power play points on that second unit, but with that said, one of your better defensive options. But in terms of a 4-game week, you might want to add some volume for your peripherals, and if you're doing that, Matt Roy at 10% might be a pretty good option for you. 2.25 hits per game, 1.6 blocks per game is pretty decent, 88th and 89th percentiles there. Not going to get you any power play time, doesn't shoot the puck a lot, and doesn't score goals, but he does have 10 hits, 10 blocks in his last 4 games, so he might be one of your better peripheral adds for the week. But that's going to do it for the Washington Capitals. Let's keep it moving with the Vancouver Canucks. So obviously with the Canucks, they're going through some injury troubles. Quinn Hughes may be back next week. We don't know, but obviously he drives this team. 42 points in 34 games is really good. Now, you can see this patch of players right over here. Miller, Pettersson, DeBrusk, Garland, Besser. Those are the guys that drive the offense for Vancouver. Obviously, Pettersson is out. 28 points in 34 is a little underwhelming for him anyway. 9 power play points, not bad, but you could do a little bit better there at Pettersson if you're listening. He's probably not. JT Miller back and healthy, 25 points in 28 games. He's kind of near his normal pace, but still a little bit lacking. You can get exposure to him through Jake DeBrusk. 28 points in 38 games, 9 power play points, 1.5 hits per game is nice for his peripheral floor. We'll go over his hub in just a second. And then another option here is Connor Garland, 73 on the completeness rating, 29 points in 38 games, 9 power play points again, similar to DeBrusk. Very similar numbers, just a little bit less hits. Brock Besser is pretty much owned up, and he's got fewer points, actually 10 power play points, so 1 more there, but he's way higher ownership, so that doesn't make a ton of sense. Now, in the past, you could have gone Pius Suter when he was filling in for JT Miller. He's been a little bit colder lately. That's why he's not on our list to the left. But with that said, there are a couple of other options that you could potentially find lower down here. You can see Myers there, who we'll get to in just a second. But as we switch and look at their player hubs, we're going to start with Jake DeBrusk. If he's available, go out and grab him. 5 points in his last 6 games, a power play point. He's line 1. He's power play 1. He's been trending up basically since earlier December, from a 54 up to a 59. He's right around that 0.75 point per game number, 95th percentile in goals. Shot volume is okay. I'd like to see it a little bit higher than that. Power play numbers are good, 88th percentile, and 1.53 hits per game is nice. So you're getting that peripheral coverage. You're getting dual position eligibility. So if he is available, go out and grab Jake DeBrusk. Now, similarly, if he's not available, there's a couple of other options. It depends on what you need. So if you need hits, Kiefer Sherwood is still the best option. 100th percentile. He's, I believe, number 1 in the league in hits, 5.79 hits per game. That's the main reason to own him. Now, the offense has dried up, only 1 goal in his last 6 games, but 26 hits and 14 shots. So still shooting around 2 shots per game and getting a ton of hit coverage. So if you're in a bangers league, I'm sure he's owned up. He's dual position eligible, which also helps. But this is your hitter for the week if you need it. If he's available in a 10-teamer, I would go out and grab him if that's going to do anything for you in a points league where you're getting a point per hit or anything like that. Now, in terms of top 6 coverage, you've got line 2, power play 1 for Connor Garland, 44% owned. Single position right winger, around the same production as Jake DeBrusk, 0.76 points per game, a little bit fewer goals than DeBrusk, 82nd percentile, a little bit higher assists, 90th percentile. Shot volume is a touch higher at 86th percentile. Power play is still good at 88th percentile. So it's looking still like a career year for Connor Garland. He has cooled off just a touch. You can see him kind of stagnating in this channel between a 54, 56, somewhere in this range for the last couple of weeks, but that is decent news, and he's still getting a decent line assignment and power play 1. So with that said, speaking of power play 1, if Quinn Hughes is out, they have Tyler Myers listed as power play 1 right now. I don't know how productive he will be in that role. And the only reason to really go get him, unless you're just looking for blocks, which is 93rd percentile, 1.82 blocks per game. Hits are decent at 1.16, but everything else kind of sucks. So the only reason to go grab him would be this PP1 exposure and some blocks coverage. You're in a points league that has 1 point per block and a little bit of power play point coverage. That would be the main reason to grab him. 2% ownership. He might be there for you. As a deep league option. He's not my best option in terms of defenseman overall this week, but if Quinn Hughes comes back, then this probably becomes a moot point, as he will drop somewhere in the lineup and won't be on that power play. So keep that in mind as you're looking for some power play exposure this week. But speaking of power play exposure, there's a number of guys you can have from our next team, and that is the Seattle Kraken. Now, as we look at the Kraken, Vince Dunn is back and healthy. He is really good. Again, 17 points in 19 games, 4 power play points, 1.4 blocks per game, and 80.6 on the completeness rating. That's a little bit better than Brandon Montour. 22 points in 38 games. He was the power play 1 quarterback, 77 on the completeness rating, but he has been dethroned by Vince Dunn on that power play assignment. So there's a number of options. You can see this huge cluster of players all around the same range. Bjorkstrand is available, 26 points on the year, 11 goals, 6 power play points, 1.1 hits per game is not bad for him. You also have Chandler Stevenson in the top 6, 24 points in 38 games. He is still getting power play 2 assignment. You also have Jaden Schwartz, who's our number 1 ad from the Kraken this week, 12 goals on the year, 25 points. You've got Shane Wright, who's dual position eligible, 17 points in 36, 7 power play points. Shot volume very low for me, and we'll get into that when we look at his file. And then there's also Kakko there. You can see at 17 points in 36, and that includes some time with the Rangers, but he's been pretty decent, a little bit spotty since he came over, but he does have 1 goal, 2 assists, 3 points in his last 4 games. So as we look at Jaden Schwartz's player hub, you got dual position eligibility, only 11% ownership. Point per game is a little bit lower than some of the guys we were just talking about at 0.64. Goal coverage is decent, 86th percentile. Shot volume is decent, 85th. You've got a little bit of power play exposure, especially now, line 1 and power play 1. That top line currently looks like Jaden Schwartz, Matty Beniers, and Kaapo Kakko. That power play 1 is Schwartz, Stevenson, McCann, Bjorkstrand, and Dunn. So that's how they've got things settled right now. Power play 2 is Kakko, Beniers, Burakovsky, Montour, and Wright. So I'm pretty sure that every one of these guys is going to get you some sort of power play coverage, And that's the good news. And they're all really available. 11% is the highest ownership percentage of any of these guys. The only problem is, obviously, Seattle spreads out their scoring. So if you can't get Schwartz or if you don't want Schwartz, the other option is Matty Beniers. Same line assignment, but different power play exposure here. A little bit lower point per game number, 0.56. Assists are decent. Shot volume is lower. Everything is a little bit lower with Beniers. But with that said, 5 points in a 4-game point streak. So 3 goals, 2 assists, and he's currently riding that 4-game point streak. So he is relatively hot right now. That top line seems to be getting some chemistry, which is good news for them. And potentially you, if you go out and grab Matty Beniers. He's just a single position center, which will limit his availability on this Saturday at the very least. Now up next, we have Shane Wright. He was red hot, going from a 20 or even back here at a 16 all the way up to a 37. He's still climbing, but just a little bit slower. So 3 assists, 2 power play points in his last 5 games. He is power play 2, 6% center right wing dual eligible. You're getting him for the power play exposure, and he does score goals. He is a pretty decent option on that power play, but the shot volume is atrocious at 1 shot per game and not a lot of peripheral coverage to speak of. He's under half a point per game, so maybe not your best option, and that's kind of the case with both him and Kakko. So as we look at Kakko, since coming over, he's been okay. He's had a goal, I believe, maybe 2 goals, 2 assists, 3 points in his last 4 games, 4% owned, single position right winger. You're getting around the same point per game number, a little bit higher shot volume. He's getting a little bit of power play time now, which he never got in New York. The hits are okay. He's around a hit per game, but nothing really crazy to speak of. But you are getting that line 1 assignment and power play 2 from Kaapo Kakko, so that's why we're mentioning him here. But that's going to do it for the deep dive on some of these teams with the best schedules. Now we're going to take a better look at some of the overall players that you can add this week. Now, we didn't touch on a lot of D, and there are a bunch that you can find, and a lot of them coming out of Anaheim. Again, we went over this in a previous week, but for this week, you've got Radko Gudas, 31%. He's actually started to score this week. 1 goal, 3 assists, 4 points in his last 7, 19 hits, 18 blocks. That's what you're getting out of him. 96th percentile in hits, 98th in blocks. You're getting a hits and blocks D with tons of volume, 4 games this week, but it is Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday. So you do have to keep that in mind with each of these first 3. Now, he's 31% owned. You also have Jacob Trouba, who I mentioned in a previous video as well, 100% or 100 percentile in terms of blocks, almost 3 blocks per game, almost 2 hits per game, and he gets some shot volume as well. He's a lot less offensive even than Radko Gudas, which is kind of hard to believe given what he used to do in Winnipeg. But with that said, 47% owned is a little bit high given what he's going to do for you. But if he is available in a 10-team league, you could do worse than grabbing a hits and block specialist in Jacob Trouba. If you want a little bit of power play exposure, you can add Jackson Lacombe, who we also discussed when we touched on the Ducks in a previous week. 16% owned, 4 points in 1 power play point in his last 5 games. So that's encouraging, as this defenseman was kind of, he's on one of the power play units. They have Zellweger on the other power play unit. So it just depends on which power play unit is more effective. And he's also going to get a couple of blocks in their 91st percentile in terms of blocks coverage. Shot volume is a little bit low. Half a point per game is not bad for a younger D. And he is getting a little bit of power play exposure. So that's decent at 16% ownership. Now up next, we have Jonas Brodin. 5 points in his last 5 games, 2 goals, 3 assists, and Jared Spurgeon is down. I don't know how long that is going to be. I'm assuming it's going to be a little bit longer. Lower body injury, looked like a knee with that slew foot. So with that said, Brodin's ice time should go up. Brock Faber's ice time is going to go through the roof. And at 5% owned, you could probably find him in most league sizes, 97th percentile in terms of blocks. So look at the difference between 97th percentile is 2 blocks per game. You have Trouba at 100th percentile at 3 blocks per game. So that's the difference. That's why Trouba's ownership is so high. But with that said, Brodin's going to get you a little bit more offense, albeit around the same as Lacombe, around a half a point per game. Assist numbers are about the same, 77th percentile. Shot volume is okay, could be a little bit better. Not a lot of hits and no power play production so far. So I don't know if they're going to give him a power play look. It's usually Faber or Spurgeon, and Faber is going to run with that for the time being, but maybe he gets power play too and chips in a power play point here and there. Up next, we've got Noah Hannafin. This is sort of a shallow league play, 69% owned. There's also Devon Taves, who's red hot. He was 79% owned. I debated whether or not to add him, but Hanifin is right at the upper echelon of what I would consider available in a 10-team league or maybe even an 8-team league. 6 points in his last 7 games, 3 goals, 3 assists, and he's going to get you some blocks coverage, 91st percentile there. Assists are pretty decent, shot volume right around the same as Brodin. So this is kind of the value that you can get on Brodin. You look at the two of them, very similar, very hot over the last couple of games, and the difference in ownership is crazy, just given the production when they're pretty much covering the same categories, blocks, and then the offensive metrics are very similar. So definitely worth a Brodin pickup, but I did want to mention Hanifin. The main feature for his file is if he gets power play exposure, which a lot of people assumed was going to happen at the beginning of the year. It didn't quite happen. Every now and then he does get some looks on the power play, so keep an eye on those power play assignments with Hanifin. Now, if you're still looking for a Vegas defenseman and you want to find more of a hits and blocks option, Brayden McNabb at 19% ownership is your best bet, and he's been putting up some offense, 4 points in his last 6, 1 goal, 3 assists, and 11 blocks. So 98th percentile in terms of blocks, 2.29, and then 1.5 hits per game is nice as well. So you have Gudas, Trouba, and McNabb, your hits and blocks D. We also mentioned Tyler Myers, who's a little bit of that. And then we also mentioned one other player earlier on who's I'm blanking on the name right now, but there's a couple of hits and blocks options for you this week. And you can probably find a lot of them on your waiver wire. There's some in each ownership percentage bracket, depending on your league size. So that's going to do it for the defenseman. Up next, we'll take a look at the goaltending. At the Goalie Hub, there's not a ton of options this week, but I did want to cover a couple of options for you. Your best option, depending on your league size, if you can grab him, would be Lukas Dostal, who apparently is still the number 1 in Anaheim. You can see here at the bottom, 3 wins in his last 6, 890 save percentage, 2.83 goals against. But he's got 2 wins in his last 3, and he started 5 straight starts not that long ago. So Gibson has only played 1 time in the last, I believe, 6 games. Gibson's only 14% owned, and he has a decent save percentage, but it does look like it's Dostal's. He's at 47% ownership, so he might be there for you in a 12-teamer, probably there for you in a 10-teamer. They do have a 4-game week, and they will see each of these goaltenders. So we'll take a quick look at John Gibson just by comparison. You can see here his goal saved above expected, very good, 906 save percentage, 2.9 goals against, not getting a ton of wins, and definitely awful team defense. But both of these goaltenders have been relatively productive, and they're both well above expected, 98th percentile in terms of that. For Lukas Dostal, tons of save volume. He's getting the start volume as well. So this is a guy that should be on your radar. He's lost the net when Gibson came back, but he's kind of taken that back over. Anaheim has a 4-game week this week and then a 3-game week the following week. Only 1 back-to-back in that span. So it should be Dostal getting 4 to 5 starts in that stretch. Now, another option that we can talk about is Yaroslav Askarov, one of the best statistical guys that we'll talk about today. 14% ownership. 4 starts in his last 6 games. So they're using him more than they're using Georgiev. They want to see what they have here. And he's doing really well. 921 save percentage, 2.4 goals against, only 2 wins. Obviously, Team D is going to be a factor there. But with that said, even averaging 3.5 expected goals against, he's been playing really, really well. 1 win in his last 4, but a 2.55 goals against and a 919 save percentage over those last 4 games. So very consistent since coming over to the San Jose Sharks. He's starting today in New Jersey. We'll have to see how that goes. The Devils can absolutely score, so these numbers might go down a touch. But with that said, he is one of the potential 1A options that you can find on the waiver wire at 14% ownership. Now, another 1A option that you can find at the moment is Jonathan Quick, who just got lit up by the Washington Capitals. They put up 6 on him, 7 in the game total with an empty netter. 1 win in his last 4, and the team defense is atrocious. This is why the Rangers are struggling. But with that said, on the year, he's got decent numbers, 913 save percentage, 2.6 goals against, and with Shesterkin out, he's going to be getting the majority of the starts. Now, they do have a back-to-back, so if you're watching this Saturday night, they play on Sunday, and Louis Domingue is probably going to start that game. So if you need a spot start, maybe not the best option just given the Rangers team defense. However, he will get a start for you tomorrow. The Rangers, I believe, have a 3-game week next week, so Quick should get all 3, I would imagine. So this is a guy that you can add as a short-term 1A or short-term starting option and he's played excellent. It's not really his fault that he's letting in all these goals. It's the team defense, which is obviously the problem there. But he is only 28% owned, so he is probably there for you in a 12-teamer. I picked him up this week, got one really good start and one bad start, so you take what you can get off the waiver wire. Now, the next guy that we'll talk about is a lot further down this list, but he does have a 4-game week next week, Alex Nedeljkovic. So Jari still way down here. Nedeljkovic is their best option right now. 2 wins in his last 3 starts, 2.34 goals against, 915 save percentage. So this is a file that's not great on the season, 889, 3.2 goals against, not terrible, but could be better. 6 wins in 16 games is not great. But in terms of the options that they have, it's Nedeljkovic or it's Jari. And Jari has, right there with him, he's kind of climbed up. But, after this massive climb, taking a step back, only 1 win in his last 4 games, 899 save percentage, 3 goals against average for Jari. So he's well below expected as well. So Nedeljkovic and Jari, there will be one back-to-back at least. So both of these guys will factor in, but Nedeljkovic at 6% ownership is probably the better value. If you're looking for a spot start, you can maybe get him at least once, if not twice, next week. Now, up next is a guy I haven't talked about all year, and that is Spencer Knight. So this is a very good defensive team, 82nd percentile for the Florida Panthers, the defending Cup champions. You win with defense, and they've been doing that, but he is below expected, and he hasn't put up good numbers, which is why I haven't mentioned him. The goals against is fine. The 891 save percentage is not great, but the reason I'm mentioning him here is the wins. 7 wins in 15 is not terrible. The team defense, the team exposure in general, 2 wins in his last 3, 2.67 goals against, 896 save percentage. So he's been getting the wins, and if you're in a points league and you need those wins, this is a guy that you can turn to whenever they're throwing him in there. Obviously, Florida is good team exposure as well, so Knight at 14% ownership, 2 wins in his last 3, 2.63 goals against. That's going to be something that's going to be valuable for at least some of you out there. And last and probably least, but another short-term starting option, Leevi Meriläinen. I don't have a file on him because he wasn't available at the beginning of the year. Ullmark is out. So with that said, Forsberg should be their next option, but he's only gotten 1 start since that happened, and he had an 840 save percentage. It wasn't a good start, so they've given Meriläinen a bunch of those starts. And with that said, let me pull up his file. You can see here he had a rough start here against Dallas, 840 save percentage, but a good game against Minnesota with 30 saves and a 968 save percentage. Otherwise, it's been below 900 and really not ownable in terms of save percentage, but he does have 2 wins in 4 starts, and he's got 4 starts in these last 5 games. So 2% ownership, decent team exposure that's in a playoff spot, technically speaking, and you're going to get him at a premium at 2%. That might be worth it if you're not looking for save percentage. He's not really going to get that, but he might get you some wins. 2 wins in his 3 starts. I guess one of these was a relief appearance, but with that said, he's maybe not the best option, probably maybe my last option, but at least he's going to get you some wins. But that's going to do it for this video. If you like this video or have any comments about guys that you are keeping an eye on as we head into week 14, let me know in the comments section below. Let me know if you'd be interested in a trade targets video as we head towards the trade deadline. That could be very useful, and we could potentially take a look at the playoff schedule as well. That would be something. If you want to see that, let me know in the comments section below. Thanks again for watching, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.